welcome. It is May 12th, 2014, and I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. I'm Jason Grisgoric, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you the opportunity to talk to those in the know in the State House here on Columbus Report. I'm very fortunate to have with me at the roundtable today Representative Louis Blessing.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Thanks for having me.
It's been a little while, but of course, we like to get everybody back in on the roundtable to discuss current affairs and issues, and of course, we have a few things to catch up on and a few things to talk about as things have progressed. So if you are joining us here tonight on the 12th, please join us, 825-3971, or live at waycross.org. All questions will be answered tonight. Well, last we were here, we were in the midst of, well, it was pre-election, of course, and so we'll be discussing some turnarounds of the election, but
Sure.
Of course, the one thing that has hit since our last discussion has been the mid-biennium review. Most people are all wondering about the budget. Of course, now we're looking at the review portion of this. We spoke with Representative Pillage last month, and she was a little concerned, as some people were. Of course, you have a different spin up because you actually have a bill within
That is correct.
the biennium here. Your thoughts on what was passed or what was given of the 14 bills that were going out and the changes and appropriations that were going on by Governor Kasich?
In which part?
Well, let's talk about
14 bills.
That's true. That's true. Let's start with yours. Let's talk about the biennium budget in general and what we were looking at in his decision of these are 14 things that we need to look at. Why these specific, or at least in your mind, why these specific, and then we can always go into yours.
Well, good question. Sometimes it's difficult to know what goes on in the governor's mind. But to be perfectly honest with you, I think he's just used to annual budgeting. I mean, he was in Congress for a number of years, and I think this is his way of giving Ohio de facto annual budgeting, because as you know, we are on biennial budgeting.
Correct.
So as far as a correction, you know, I don't know if I'd call it that. So it's really just its own budget. And as I had stated, I think that, you know, you have 9 of the 14 bills, you know, have passed out of the House. These are the fairly non-controversial ones. These are like your bills on opiates, for example.
Sure.
So they usually did pretty well.
I was going to say, some of them are mental health and drug-related issues as you're going through these. And of course, as we go down towards yours, of course, dealing with state lottery and casino provisions.
Yes.
You would think, and from our discussion, House Bill 491 seemed to be a good cheering section behind you as well.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely wonderful having the Casino Control Commission, you know, being able to jump in when necessary in testimony. But truth be told, I mean, this is a fairly simple bill. What this really does is it gives the Ohio Casino Control Commission authority over skill-based amusement machines and just the gambling law and casino law in general. And some would say this is really kind of a crackdown on internet cafes, giving them the regulatory power to do so. But the big thrust with this bill is that now you need a license to conduct these skill-based amusement machines and operate them. So you have to obtain the license from the Ohio Casino Control Commission. It's renewed every 3 years, and now the machines must be approved from an approved vendor. Okay. So it's not like you can just get around it, which is really what the internet cafes were doing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. For those who weren't familiar with these internet cafes, these were basically people setting up a mom and pop type shop,
yes.
And there was a small little terminal kind of in the corner, and it didn't play with the laws in which were already established by the Lottery Commission, correct?
Correct.
Now you're obviously kind of tightening this down to make sure that, again, not knowing where the funds were going, correct? Because that was part of the issue. No one knew where the exchange of hands was going.
That's right. There was actually, you know, some of the money was going to, you know, some Ukrainian company, and you know, we didn't like that, of course. And you know, we were in Columbus, and we uphold the Constitution, and you know, casinos were voted in a few years back, and you know, it only passed 52 to 48, but they are in the Constitution. Internet cafes seek to get around that, and that's why we're trying to regulate them more. And it's not like we want to put them out of business. I mean, small mom and pop shops that have something off to the side, as long as the merchandise, if you will, is below $10 or value thereof, if you play by the rules, you get the license, you're good. We're not out to crack down on those people. We're out to crack down on people that are legitimately the bad players that are trying to go against the casinos and just generally skirt the law in general.
And as well, this is not saying this type of legislation is also not saying things are going bad within the lottery/casino vicinities now that we've had for 2-3 years now.
Yes.
Within the state of Ohio. There's nothing truly wrong or bad going on there. We're not going to be seeing the horseshoe disappearing or
No.
anything to that effect.
No.
We're just kind of tightening those belt strings, so to speak.
Correct, and just basically broadening the authority of the Ohio Casino Control Commission.
And again, like I said, here were 14 bills that came up that the governor said, we may want to tackle. This was something, obviously, not a lot of people get a chance, as we were talking, to get to go to with a bill like this.
Sure.
So, again, from your standpoint, you're saying it's an honor almost to be able to be chosen to basically stand up for one of these pieces,
Absolutely.
whether for or against.
Yes.
And as you said, there was a great fanfare behind you, so it made passage for these things a lot easier.
That's correct. Although it was not without controversy. I mean, there's certainly groups wanting to put in their amendments, and you got to go talk with the governor and the Senate, of course, to see that this is something that they might want to do. Currently, there's talk of amendments to change the penalty provisions of this. I mean, there was concern that having a first-time offense as a felony was too harsh. The Ohio Casino Control Commission disagreed with that assertion. What they wanted to see was the felony in place because prosecutors typically aren't going to go after misdemeanors, and you need some teeth in there to give them an incentive to actually enforce the law. However, other people were saying that, well, we've already got enough felons out there. If they commit some crime unwittingly and they're screwed. They've got a felony and that's it. It's on their record for the rest of their life. And how do you get a good job when you have a felony?
Right.
So there's ongoing discussions with that amendment. We're probably going to be considering them actually tomorrow. So, but it's definitely good. We've had a lot of interested party meetings about this, and the process is working, and we hope to have something through hopefully by the end of May.
And at that point, is that kind of like ties up pretty much everything on your end as well as the governor's end, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, where do you think we will go from there? Obviously, will we be back to business at hand, so to speak, and be able to go through what needs to be finished for year end? For this run session, because you're almost ready for summer break.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm actually sitting on House Bill 379, which was the civil immunity for contractors during a declared emergency.
And we talked about that in the last episode.
Right.
So
yes, and that bill is actually in the Senate. I think they're running around with some other bills of their own, and haven't quite had time to get to that. I've called the chairman and said, hey, let's get this one moving, and he agreed. That passed the House actually did pass unanimously. And really, once the Senate gets around to hearing it, hopefully we'll get a favorable vote and get that out too.
Well, it sounds like everything seems to be going on the up and up, which is much better than what a lot of things have happened.
Sure.
With the stall, or even, was it last year or 2 years ago when summer break was on its way, and we weren't sure if it was going to happen, if we had to go into summer in order to get a lot of these resolved. So
right.
It sounds like everything seems to be go smooth sailing.
I believe so.
Well, of course, as certain things have been going on, and obviously we did say that an election did occur, a primary this past Tuesday, was already a week ago past, and a lot of things have changed. And one, of course, on the ballot was some information about capital improvements, of course, and that went on. Where do you think that has either helped or hindered us when we had to vote on certain things with the capital appropriations?
What do you mean? It was public works.
Was
actually.
it more public works? And let's clear that up. So, yes, it's more of capital improvement programs for local public works.
Right.
So,
right. Sure. I was going to say, you talked about it's been a week since the election. It's hard to know that, actually. I still see several signs
This is true.
still up. But yeah, that was issue 1. And what that does is that is $1.875 billion over the course of 10 years. The first 5 years, you have a maximum of $175 million, $175 million. 5 years, next 5 years after that is $200 million per year. And we pay that through general obligation bonds. And really that just goes for roads, bridges, other public infrastructure needs. And quite frankly, living on Galbraith Road myself, I could attest to the fact that it is needed. And it passed well. I mean, it was 68-32, and I think the people saw that this was really not a major spending increase. This has been done for, I don't know, 30 or so years. I think it started in '87. And every 10 years or so, they put another amendment to the Constitution and do another 10 years. So really, we're not suddenly just spending $1.875 billion over 10 years.
Right.
We've already been spending this money since 2005. So really, we're just maybe ratcheting up a little bit as indexed for inflation. So all in all, I think the voters saw that, they understood that, understood the need, and passed it.
And as we were saying, sometimes that little bit of an increase, you see that increase in a lot of things. And as we were talking, you've got to pay for the service in order for things to happen. It's not the wiggle of a nose and something happens, and potholes happen, road infrastructure, new construction, things of that nature have to happen.
Right.
Money just doesn't grow on trees, and as the state of Ohio has found, you can't print money.
Sure.
So you've got to have some way about it. And as we saw here, you had a fairly good margin that people agreed that service is a necessity.
Absolutely.
And as you said, it's just a continuation. It's not just something that
Right.
that just came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when people think of infrastructure, things like that, people always go, well, where does that go in the sense of, say, something like a certain bridge that most people are talking about? Would that be something that could possibly help go on the docket for that, or are we still searching for other means to help the Brents Bends?
We are searching for other means. In fact, I'd spoken with the governor's people, and they are definitely in favor of course, the tolling. They don't want to do any other method, and they want it in bad. The thing that I have an issue with that, you look at some of the polling, and a lot of people have problems with tolls. We've just never had them here in Southwest Ohio.
No.
Northern Ohio, Turnpike, sure, they're used to that.
They're used to that completely.
Down here, not so much. And the thing is how do you deal with the compliance of all this? Now, for people watching, this isn't going to be, the toll booths that you may have seen in the movies where people have to slow down, throw in money and then move forward. It's not going to be anything like that. You will essentially, if you pay for it, you'll get a transponder in your car and you can fly right on through.
Similar to the iPass in Indiana or Illinois?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and if you don't have one, it'll take a picture of your license plate and send it to your place of residence. So that, in terms of causing backups, not a big deal. But the problem is I just look at the compliance, and it's like, you get people that, I remember one of my continuing education meetings I had to keep my professional engineer's license. They were showing pictures from people in Florida, and they were like hanging out the back and putting their hand over the license plate, and then you've got to actually mail out the bills, and I feel like it could be a problem administratively.
Sure.
Certainly, if the polls can be believed, you've got people that have reservations about it, and I'm not disputing that the bridge and the corridor itself need to be done.
I think that's a definite. I think everybody sees that need,
Sure.
and that's a main artery not only for
Sure.
our well-being here in the city, but also our well-being for the whole country. It's the main north-south thoroughfare.
Correct, and that's what I think angers a lot of people, is that they feel that since this is Ohio and Kentucky, that this falls under interstate commerce, and that the federal government really should be taking a lot of this hit for building the bridge. Unfortunately, they have essentially said not going to happen. So it's left to us to do it. I would be more amenable to something like raising the gas tax as opposed to tolls. The tolls just kind of, and again, I can be persuaded, but it just, with the gas tax, unless you're refining your own oil, there's 100% compliance. The revenue from that has been dropping year after year, because you have these more fuel-efficient cars. So it's basically not as valuable as it used to be.
Sure.
And I'm not so certain why they don't want to take that tactic. And once you get tolls in, if it turns out to be somewhat successful in raising revenue, which I'm sure it would be, what's to stop local governments from doing the same thing over time? They may not have authority to do it now, but chances are they probably would later on down the line, and then where does that leave us?
Right.
So.
And I guess the other question it has as well is, obviously we were saying it's Ohio and Kentucky.
Yeah.
When does Kentucky get their fair share of, because obviously we would like the money, because you're coming from our area, but I'm sure Kentucky's thinking the same thing. We want to make some money off of this too. So now you're getting, if anything would go right, from both sides of the river, so to speak. Who's to say people are going to go, well, I know what that toll area is, and it goes out on the internet. As you well know, things spread rapidly, and we're finding other means, and all of a sudden now Cincinnati gets bypassed for whatever reason. They're taking 465 or 265 or what other means they want to come up, as opposed to just taking straight up 75.
That's right, and it should also be noted that the Kentucky legislature, both the House and the Senate, passed legislation banning tolls.
And that's what I thought. And my father
Governor
would
Beshear.
argue saying it was the other way, and I said, no, I think Kentucky said, ain't gonna happen.
It was vetoed by their governor, of course, so that it still remains a possibility. But yeah, there are people that will go around. The general, consensus is, well, what's your time worth? With traffic backups, I mean, even if you do pay the toll, it tends to be worth it. But at the same time, they say, well, it's pay to play. If you're going to use the bridge, well, then you should be the one paying for it. And I don't dispute that. The problem is there's a lot of people that don't really have a lot of money that have to cross that bridge every day. And the number that I heard was $2 a crossing. So if you're crossing, let's just say you work 50 weeks a year, 5 days a week, you're looking at what? One way, so 4 by 5, so 20 by 50, you're looking at $1,000 a year just to use the bridge. And I don't know of too many people that can take a hit of $1,000 per year, especially if they're lower income.
Right.
So I don't know how that's going to fly. Not to mention the motorists that actually tear up the roads and the bridges the most are the big, heavy, big rigs.
Correct.
And of course, that's probably going to be paid for by the company they work for. I mean, it's not as big.
That doesn't affect them, correct.
Right.
But you're looking at the family that, again, that may not be able to
correct
that later.
So, yeah, it's an interesting issue. I am officially the only legislator from Southwest Ohio that has not signed on to the McGregor-Mallory legislation. But I don't think there's anything wrong with treading with some caution here.
The other thing I was just thinking about is, if people do start changing their route and say the Big Mac Bridge becomes the next major, then you're looking at quite possibly that being repaired or in need of greater repair, and it just goes back and forth. Now, granted, obviously the Big Mac doesn't see as much traffic as, say, the Bread and Spence,
sure.
But I think I'm glad we're seeing, and as opposed to being reactionary, we're being very proactive in regards to let's plan this out prior to just tearing that bridge down.
Sure.
Which I'm sure we've seen in the past, and we know that this bridge needs to be tended to. But I think getting the ducks in the row is going to make this process, I would hope, a lot easier than what we may see. I mean, I remember seeing projections of it maybe 8 years ago that they wanted to start even thinking about it,
right.
And where they wanted to tear into one way or go another way. And here we are still today wondering when this may happen.
Sure.
Obviously things still need to be in a row and things need to be prepared. Do you think there's any idea of any timetable at any point? I mean, once we probably find a consensus, I think.
Yeah, I think they want to start construction in the next couple of years. Whether that happens remains to be seen.
Sure. Well, we'll be definitely keeping posted on this because, again, it does affect all of us here in the area, and with, again, things that have just started rolling in,
Yeah.
it's good to have the soundboard here on the show to be able to explain to people, because a lot of people get confused and concerned about, like I said, my father still swears up and down that neither one of us can toll, and it was a very interesting Mother's Day conversation. So
And rightly so. And that's something that I had actually spoken with the chamber that I wanted to see happen. I wanted to see the marketing campaign ramped up. I wanted to see a lot of local businesses, local leaders getting behind it and saying, yeah, we need this. This is how we believe it should be done, so that there was a coalition. As it stands, it really just seems to be the local chambers behind it. A lot of businesses don't want to get out in front of it, which I'd again really like to see them just say, hey, look, I'm in favor of this. And then that way if it turns out to be unpopular, there's a growing number of people that says, hey, look, this is needed.
Sure.
To quell some of that hopefully not so angry mob if tolls if they go into place and they turn out to be unpopular.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring it up in that regards, because you don't hear about the other side. It's always, well, the government this or the government that. Well, it's not, as you're saying, not everything is pushing from Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
You're having backings from other places, and especially if you had downtown behind you, or Newport, or
Sure.
everybody on that side, it would probably go a little bit easier, and probably calm the masses down so that they understand a little bit.
Right.
Again, it's always a development every so often, but it's good to hear that there's still discussion going on with this. And you're saying, hopefully in a couple years. Now, I guess my other question is, other than the tolls, have they decided on a means of a type of bridge, or is even that still in discussion?
Ooh. That's a good question. I don't really have an answer for that.
I wasn't certain because, like I said, if I remember correctly, I know some people who live actually right as you cross the bridge and you take the first exit. They live right up on the hill over there, and they had been shown, I want to say at least 8 years ago, that this was a proposal, and it's like, and there goes my house type of thing.
Yeah.
So I did not know if anything has changed or if there's been new speculation.
Right. The most that I had heard about it wasn't just the bridge, of course, it was the whole corridor.
Correct.
And the old bridge stays in place, and I believe they build another one next to it, which is 8 lanes both ways, which really should cover you for the next millennium.
True.
But really, in terms of type of bridge, I mean, like suspension, I have no idea.
Well, it would be interesting to see, because again, Cincinnati is known for so many things. What a nice way to be able to quite possibly give another landmark to the city.
I hadn't thought of it in that vein. That's something to think about.
I want to write that down. Take that with you. If you're joining us tonight on the 12th, please join in 825-3971. That's our phone number here. Get your questions answered here. As you can see, we've got a couple other topics today, so be on the ball. Another topic that has been coming up, and we talked about this with Representative Pillage on the biennium budget review, was, of course, he had talked about changing things with Veterans Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
She is very adamant and very pro, because, of course, being a veteran herself. These were initiatives that seem quite interestingly added. Do you think that they needed to be in there, or do you think this was just, I don't want to say to placate those, but I mean, again, you're looking at health issues, road repair, things like this, and then the veterans issues come in as well.
I think they're tying up loose ends. It turns out that veterans bills are very, very popular in Columbus. They're very, very popular with constituents, and I think it was smart that they put that in there. I mean, a lot of times with controversial bills like this, the MVR, you want something in there that's very popular amongst everybody, so that some of the more controversial stuff doesn't seem as bad.
Sure. And then, of course, the other thing that was in there, other than what we had talked about, is some school-related things. Of course, student dropout prevention and career preparation.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is a great turn to hear, because a lot of people will tell you, well, the governor's forgetting schools, and school funding has been cut and things of that. Here's some new legislation that's going on that's quite possibly ready to help a lot of our at-risk students.
Right.
And what a better way to start than to get this going.
Yes.
Obviously, you're not a part of those, but you're probably seeing a lot of those going through as well.
Yeah.
Not a part of your area, but again, as Representative Pillich has said, you know, a stronger workforce comes from a stronger school area, and hopefully, we'd like to see some strong schools being brought back to the state.
Absolutely.
And we're not just talking the colleges. We're talking, you know, starting local and building out, which I think was always our hard part here in the state, is that a lot of people think that big government's forgetting little government. And I think we've seen that, unfortunately, with a lot of the cuts that we've talked about many, many times over.
Sure, sure. I was just going to say with education, though, the other side of the equation with that is that, you know, we should be looking at parents and students themselves. I mean, we've almost doubled the amount of money that we spend on education in the state of Ohio since 1997. That was actually in the governor's budget last year, 2013. But, you know, you still hear people saying, you know, our numbers are still bad. A lot of it that I've been finding out, and again, I don't have all the solutions. In many ways, it's like, where do you start with this?
Sure.
Is that, you know, parents and students just, I don't feel that they care enough about education as they should. I mean, we're often compared with Finland and, you know, North Korea, or not North Korea, good Lord,
Oh
South
my
Korea.
goodness, that would be...
Well, what a Freudian slip. You know, countries that do very, very well with, you know, for example, math. But it's ingrained in their culture, I think, more so than it is here. I mean, there's a lot of kids focused on sports and extracurriculars, but, you know, education, a lot of students and a lot of parents don't care about it as much as they should. You find teachers a lot of times feel kind of hamstringed, like they're doing more babysitting than actual teaching. It's something that we should be looking at. Now, my just simple mind would just say, okay, we need to perhaps find a way to incentivize students and parents to be more involved, whether that's a tax break or, you know, even a financial punishment of some sort.
Sure.
Something.
Financial punishment would probably get a lot of people's attention, I'm sure.
Well, yes, it would. How you would do that or go about it, I don't really know, but just something to get them motivated towards education. And, you know, students, it's very difficult when you're, you know, 13 or 14 years old, and your teacher says, well, you know, you're going to be, you know, working some horrible job if you don't start studying. Well, the kid has no reference point. He's never held a job in his entire life. He has no clue where to, you know, is that really true? They can just say, probably not. So those are some, go ahead.
And I think that's what you see a lot, is a kind of mentality. And I don't know where the slip may have gone or where anything has. And I think you brought in that point that the apathy of it is, like, I'm sure when we were in school, people had those problems where they just didn't care about school, or school just wasn't for them. I think the more and more that I've seen and the more and more that I've heard is that it's not so much a not caring about or understanding certain portions in school, it's just not caring at all. And when a family doesn't care, I think it reflects on the child, and then obviously the child brings it into the school setting. I mean, I think that is that not what might be going on? And again, I think that idea of somehow incentivizing, everybody likes a little incentive.
That's right.
I mean, that's how most people get things accomplished. If I can go to goal A or goal B, and boom, there we have it. But
yeah, you're right. And you know, in terms of the funding, we're you know, we're constitutionally required to ensure that the populace is educated. So I mean, the money will be there. I mean,
right.
that will be the case. But you're right. Getting them motivated is very difficult. There are some, you know, kind of unconventional means that have been tried and have actually been somewhat successful. I know that was at that Cristo Rey school down there in Clifton. They have actually had the kids in high school, you know, do a little bit of work on the side as part of their education, which I think would be very important. I know that I did that in engineering school at UC, and it was great. You get to see what you're working for, and you know, in the case of high school, if you're working a very back-breaking job, what you may or may not want to do in life. So that's something to consider, and of course, local school districts are encouraged to actually implement uniform policies. Just getting the discipline in there as well, and just treating school as something to really care about is important. But unfortunately, I think a lot of times that gets lost in the rhetoric of more or less funding.
Well, and I was wondering is that as the mandate is, you're as the state is to apportion money for the schools, and of course schools are funded by graduation rates, things like that, and well, not funded that way, but I mean they need to accomplish. That's what I'm getting at. They need to accomplish certain things, obviously, and by state mandate, they need to have their state testing and things of that nature, and you have to bring in obviously the higher government as well, and the. But are we always so focused on too focused on test scores, and not getting, like you're saying, that idea of showing work or work-related studies or things of that nature that may, again, motivate a child who doesn't like math but likes going to his third period, be it something that allows him to go to a small job or whatever. You've now shifted that momentum.
Yeah, it's.
And as opposed to working on, I need to definitely pass my OGT, or I need to pass this, I'm fulfilling a goal, maybe stated by a goal from that the state may reapportion, but it's still meeting a goal or meeting that lifestyle achievement goal for a student that may be lost or get lost.
Right. Now, the testing, I think, is actually, I mean, can we be doing too much of it? Absolutely. But it's still very important. I mean, the numbers need to come in. We need to kind of see what's going on. In the business world, they refer to that as benchmarking.
Sure.
So you can see, hey, this school is doing something right in a true apples-to-apples comparison. Now, is it fair to compare, say, Indian Hill versus Cincinnati Public? Not necessarily, but there are some things that you can, pull out of the data that say, wow, this has worked across the board for every school that's tried it. Maybe these other ones should get on board. The other problem with the teacher evaluations is, I often feel like a lot of times too much of the evaluation is concerned with, how well the students are doing on the tests. Now, it seems like, well, they're teachers, they teach, the students should do well, end of story. This gets back to the parental involvement. I mean, there's, if the kids are hostile and alien to the education process, as well as the parents, you can bring in the best teachers in the world, and if they don't want to learn, I mean, it's very difficult to do that. So should teachers be held accountable for something that's in many ways out of their control? I don't think so. But at the same time, they should be well qualified. There should be a good metric for determining what that is, again, is something we need to find out.
And something that just kind of in that same vein is parameters for a teacher. You're saying, and I've heard it many times, and I know people in my family who are teachers who will say, yeah, it's almost like a babysitting job. I have to make sure that this issue is tended to first before I can even teach to whatever lesson plan they have to do. And that can get lost. So, what is the true role of the teacher?
Right. They are just there to teach, and that should be the end of it. And in fact, when you have parents and students that if you get them motivated, a lot of these other issues with parents complaining about this school or that school, a lot of these things work themselves out. Parents will realize when they want the best for their students, they'll say, well, I want to send them here or there or wherever. Truly bad schools will be held accountable because simply the parents care more. So I think that's why we should be focusing on that, as opposed to some of these other issues.
Well, as we know, it's very difficult to find the right solution right away, but at least we know that there are options out there, and quite possibly will change at some point. But again, as we saw in the review, that idea is coming full circle, and that help is there, and it has been.
Sure.
So we're halfway through, guys. If you're wanting to join us, 825-3971, give us a call, please, and please join us this evening. I can't even talk tonight, but that's okay. Switching from one topic to another. 2 states have done it. We could be the third. I'm talking about joint resolution number 6, and that is the possibility, saying possibility, of the legalization of marijuana here in the state of Ohio. My first question would be, and I've read this, but I have to ask the question, why? What is the main incentive for anybody here? I mean, I think most people can gather the right answer, but why? Why would we want to be number 3, the third state in the union to decide that we're going to legalize this substance?
Good question. I think you see that people, in particular Representative Hagan, I think this has been an issue of his for a number of years. I will say that he actually has at least the process down right. I think this is something that if the state of Ohio is going to do, it should be put before the voters. It shouldn't be something that the General Assembly does. But at the same time, why third? That's a good question. You look at Colorado, for example, it's like, well, let's wait and see what happens with that state before we start jumping on the bandwagon. There's really no harm in waiting. And I'm sure there's supporters on both sides, but
sure.
Again, waiting I think is the more prudent path right now.
I was going to say, because most people hear more about Colorado than we do Washington in
right.
regards to what's been going on, as well as you're saying, why not wait? I don't know if there's been enough data that's been collected to actually say the harm or the benefit of such a bill.
Right. I would agree with that sentiment, and let's not get any misunderstandings here. I think Colorado, in many ways, is doing this for revenue. But at the same time, marijuana. Even if a lot of people say that it's this is just like alcohol, it doesn't make alcohol good. It's not something you want to see encouraged. But at the same time, there's some truth with a lot of the jails being full of minor drug offenders. What do you do there? Certainly costs the state a lot of money. But again, getting back to that waiting thing. Yeah.
Well, I think you hit on the big thing that obviously it's a revenue generator. It just like a tobacco or anything to that effect, it is, and you said alcohol as well. It's almost going in that whole syntax area of, we know these aren't the good, I'll use it in air quotes, the good things. But if by legislation, regulation, and taxation, we can make this a better substance, then that's what the state says is okay. Again, I think my concern with this, and that I asked you, is again, is there enough data to say that this is something that should go on? Like I said, I've not heard much from Washington. I've heard more from Colorado, and not because I have relatives who live in Colorado, but because it is far more media friendly. I'm assuming. Sure. But here we would be the third state. I'm sure there are other states going about this as well, but here we are. This is our state. We've got to talk about what's affecting us.
Right.
I mean, in regards to something like this, how much data do we have? I mean, what do we have that says, right or wrong, this should go on?
Not enough to be statistically significant, in my opinion. I mean, we've only, when did Colorado vote that in? It's been the past couple of years.
At least almost two years, I believe.
That's not enough time, in my estimation, to develop solid data. And not to mention, an issue like this, no matter what, is going to be a very polarizing issue. I don't think there's any chance this will happen this GA, especially before the election.
Sure, and that was going to be my next thing. This seems a little out of precedent, so to speak, that it's being introduced so late in the game. If this was a pressing issue to be a revenue generator or to make some political stands, I would have assumed this would have been added as the General Assembly began, as opposed to closer to the summer, or quite frankly,
Correct.
even September, October, when there's really 2 months left before the end of the term.
That's right. Well, you never know. They might pass it in lame duck.
Well, good point, good point. Again, this is just being brought, again, things are being discussed about this. This is nothing that's going on currently that's a yay or a nay. But you're saying this is something that's going to be brought to, and it is stating here that, could be brought up to the legislature, and then the legislation, and then to the people.
Correct.
Again, probably the wiser choice to let the state decide as opposed to the state house to decide.
Correct.
Again, we're a little late in the game, but your speculation is probably just staying as paper and not going too much further.
Correct.
Well, then we'll just move on forward then. But for those, but again, this is something that's going on, and again, we get all information about things that are going on within the state. So for those who are in the know, would like to know, we keep them informed. So another thing that is going on is, again, movements going forward within the state. There is the Freedom to Marry Amendment that is going on currently as well. So now we are not only looking at something that 3 states have taken care of, 2 states in the Marijuana Act. You're looking at something that has been kind of tested out for a while. State of Ohio, where do you think the state stands on something like this, to change an amendment like this? Obviously, we've seen some changes for and against before. We've been around here in 2008. We've seen this before. So here we are, 2014. What do you think's changed, and where do you think the state of Ohio stands on something like this?
That is a very good question. I believe it or not, I haven't gotten any emails on
Really?
that topic. Correct. I do think, again, going through the ballot is the way to go for something like that. But again, it could be a complete toss-up.
I was going to say, because I believe when we went through this in the 08 area, the state of Ohio said, I know it's popular elsewhere, but not in our state. And we're starting to see other states, Iowa, Idaho,
Right.
that are actually, you would think and scratch your head, go, those would be the last states that I would expect to take a bill like this and put into their constitution. Ohio, being the big swing state, you would think would want to take a stance one way or another and be either very pro or very against.
Well,
So
a big swing state like that, a lot of politicians would just say, no, I'm not going to touch this one with a 10-foot pole. But yeah, again, it's very difficult to predict, where we would be on this one. 6 years really isn't all that much time. It could very well go down in flames again.
Mhm.
And I think, didn't California have a few years back? They banned it as
Correct.
well. And California is not exactly a very conservative state, so you really can't say one way or another.
So this is something that could quite possibly, again, go back to the people. Do you think it would be something that we would see in November, or are you looking at maybe a
Not
couple
this November.
Not this
yeah.
November. Okay,
Yeah.
definitely something to come, but
Way
at
down.
least it's
If then. Again, I haven't heard it being discussed as much up in Columbus, and certainly really not so much in the district. So maybe that's just, people saying, well, let's just leave a sleeping dog lie, but don't know.
that's fair to say. Anything that you'd like to bring up before we start wrapping up a few things here at the state?
Well, actually, we do. We're going to be starting hearings on Senate Bill 310, actually, and that is sort of the rehash of Senate Bill 58 and 302, which, of course, is the energy efficiency and, of course, the renewable portfolio standard, the so-called energy mandates.
Yes.
So I'm still waiting on hearing about this one, but I've been getting a lot of kickback, in my inbox about this, and still can't get over the idea of locational marginal pricing with this one.
So again, this is probably something that's going to be a banter back and forth for a little while longer.
Right.
Because when we talked about it, I want to say at the beginning of the year, when we talked about it at first, there was a lot of question to it, but it didn't seem that it was going to be too difficult to explain to people or to get this going. And now it sounds like it's new. Obviously, new information comes to light, and new information comes to you to go either way.
Sure. Yeah, it's I think it was even difficult back then going through 58, and something that even the experts in Columbus readily admit that it takes years to really learn. But you know, if Ohio were free to set its own energy policy, free of, you know, federal EPA, federal government in general, and we were free to set our own policy, a mandate wouldn't make so much sense. In the sense that, well, you know, just by the nature of the market, if coal is a lot cheaper, if oil is a lot cheaper, of course that's going to be used. Solar being more expensive, it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want to use solar, or do you want higher? Do you want to use solar and have higher energy prices, or do you want to use, you know, coal and have lower energy prices? The difference here is that through you know, a medley of federal regulations, you know, both EPA and of course, you know, our federal government, the situation kind of gets a little skewed. And the big thing that you know, I have been told was the idea of locational marginal pricing. And this is what, you know, kind of gives me pause. Does it make sense to actually have a mandate? And does it actually make energy prices cheaper in the state of Ohio because of something like this if we have the mandate? What it is if you, with locational marginal pricing, let's suppose that a given area has a base generating capacity of 100 megawatts, okay? That's fine for the rest of the year. Of course, when you get into the summer, when you have your, you know, your absolute peak demand, your transmission lines, I mean, it's wire, it has resistance, which is temperature dependent. So as temperature rises, the resistance, of course, goes up. Takes a lot more power to, you know, deliver the energy. And at the same time, you know, more air conditioners are on, and it's just a more energy intensive time of the year. Point being, if you go over that base load, say you make it up to 102 megawatts, you just don't have the capacity to produce that energy to meet all the demand. So now what you have to do is you have to go out into the market at large to get a hold of that energy and then put that on the line. The problem here is if you were under the base load and say, you know, for month of March, you were, I don't know, 90 megawatts, 6 cents per kilowatt hour, fine. Now in the summer, if you've gone up to 102 megawatts and you've had to get that last two megawatts at the market at large, that may cost you 8 cents a kilowatt hour. But instead of just saying the first 100 is 6 cents per kilowatt hour, no, it's now all 8 cents per kilowatt hour for a massive 33% increase in price. And, you know, this is where solar comes in, where if you were to put a, you know, solar panels, if it was distributed the right way, you know, when you have that peak energy demand in the middle of summer on the hottest days, what of course is the most abundant thing at that point in time, which of course is the sun. And if the solar panels are just powerful enough to reduce you below that base load, you save potentially a lot of money. And is it kind of a screwed up situation? Sure. But you know, my goal here, with whether it's Senate Bill 310 or Senate Bill 58, is to ensure that the consumers have the lowest possible energy bills. You know, it's just as simple as that. But wading through all the regulations has proved very difficult, and I'm still learning.
Well, it sounds, unfortunately, like this is just going to be a continuing process, like you're saying, in a way that it's not an infantile type of thing. We've been doing solar, we've been doing wind for a number of years, but it's not been, say, within the last 10 years, do you see it so readily in your face? As we were talking earlier about it, our technology is catching up, but it still costs far more to create those pieces than it is to get the savings. And I think that's still the hard part with a lot of this. You know, I would love to have solar panels on my roof, and I think that'd be great, but how much money do I want to spend on that as a part of my home, and is it really going to offset that balance? Get you a great tax rebate for, what, 1 or 2 years, but I mean, it's not going to get you, quite frankly, is it going to?
Sure. Well, but that's, you know, it brings up the point, you know, President Obama himself was the one saying that, you know, he was basically going to drive, you know, coal-fired plants out of business through regulation. It was just something that he ran on, something that he believes. So, you know, what do you do? Even if coal is this much cheaper versus solar, but with enough, you know, regulations and taxes and everything, where does it put it, you know, and makes it difficult.
Extremely, and it doesn't make it easy on anyone who, because obviously we need the power.
Oh yeah.
You can't. I mean, you could probably go dark, but I mean, what are we really going to get back to?
Right, and I'm not willing to, you know, I know that there's going to be more and more demand. A lot of people want to push for, you know, using less and less, and that makes sense on an individual level. You know, is a noble thing to do as an individual, but to expect, you know, the economy and industry as a whole to just kind of grind to a halt because, you know, we have to use less energy for the sake of using less energy. I'm sorry, I can't really agree with that mindset.
And I think we're starting to see, you know, different means in helping reduce the amount of energy being used. But again, when it comes to the power source itself,
right.
I think we're still in that area of flux where
Yep.
sometimes the old way might be better, but there are other means out there. And until, again, the whole idea that we've discussed tonight, until we gather more data, are we going to be able to really make a wise decision?
Correct.
Well, believe it or not, we've made it to the top of the hour.
Wow.
Are you? You shocked me, everyone as well. But we are here. But if you'd like to get a hold of Mr. Blessing, you can gladly do so as easily as I can because we give that information to you. You can always contact him at the office in Columbus on the 77th High Street on the 11th floor in Columbus. You can give him a call at 614-466-9010 or email at rep29@ohiohouse.gov. He also has a website, which is the ohiohouse.gov/Lewis W. Blessing III. You can get all your information there. And of course, you can always watch him here on the Columbus Report. We're very fortunate to have him here. So, Mr. Blessing, again, we've made it to that magic hour, so I'm glad that you were able to spend the time with us to discuss these things. We'll see you back in a couple months, and we'll discuss what might have changed, and quite frankly, it might be during the summer, so we can go out in the veranda and discuss what's going on as well.
Sounds outstanding.
Perfect. So again, thank you for joining us as well. I hope that you've gained some knowledge in something that you may or may not have known. But of course, we're always here to get that information to you here on the Columbus Report. I'm Jason Krusgork, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, and I wish you a fond evening. Take care, and we'll see you next month.